Morning. Another unscripted video to which I say, oh no. Well, I guess somebody would be if they've seen the two before this, and yes, this is unscripted, but I would confirm in the two other videos I'd had possibly 4 hours sleep, not in a bad way, I guess. I'd been excited the night before, staying up and listening to music and having a great old time enjoying life. But I'd woken up with motivation in the early hours, and I'd sat down in front of a camera, and I just realised that the importance of the message was probably more important than getting the technology right. For example, using the proper camera, using a microphone, having a cameraman maybe, or even shutting the cat in another room. Anyway, deciding to do better by the audience, I figured last night I'll go to bed at the proper time and get a good night's sleep. And at about 4:30 in the morning, this cat here decides to make noise in a way that it never has previously. So I guess you could say I've been up fairly early still, possibly just without as much sleep as usual. But in supporting the audience and making it a little bit better to watch, I guess you could say I've had a bowl of cereal, something to ground out a little bit. And I'll try to remain a bit more focused or a little bit better paced with regards to taking us somewhere, going somewhere, making these videos worth your time, because I mean, really, these are made for the viewer, not for me. So, you know, I do respect you, please, and I'd like to think that the purpose of these videos is just to get me to commit to doing these properly. And by say doing these properly, I mean, heck, getting the proper spokesman in front of the camera if need be, but again, with scripts, with pertinent messages, and I guess the problem with the nature of these being a stream of consciousness type affair is that this idea isn't foreign to me. It's something that I've had in my head for 20 odd years or more. And it's often been reflected upon, you know, and so I've often thought about, well, how does this slot into society, or how does this help? And I've probably come up with lots of dialogues along the way, and realising, you know, and everyone likes to celebrate their own personal worth. Every so often I have one of these dialogues and I go, gee, that succinctly sums that up, and oh wow, if somebody heard that, they'd get it. And so I believe when I start to do these videos, and not knowing how long any given recording is going for, or even if any given recording is in fact working, because I'm literally just using a phone and just turning it around and putting it down, not knowing if I'm in frame, not knowing if I've even got the right buttons hit. But it looks like twice it's worked out, and so twice before this video there has been a video. Today I've got myself evidence that I can't juggle, just a couple of bits of fruit, again on the grounding notion, and it must be working. The cat's come and sat down right in front of me and is feeling comfortable in an audience. So I'm going to use the cat as my test audience. I'm going to gauge its reactions and sort of just believe them as they're the actions of the people out there. And my cat's currently got its feet tucked in under it, and it's looking quite comfortable. And I would believe that if you're choosing to consume media, you're in a fairly comfortable position. Now, of course, the first video probably ran for about 45 minutes. I think the second one ran for about 30 minutes. Not knowing how long this one will run for, I understand that there is a time commitment there. There could be a reason for you to be distracted at some point through it. Well, that's okay. I'm distracted at all points through it. Who knows? You know, come back to it if you will. Hit pause. So, just reflecting a little bit on. I have seen my previous videos, albeit probably not in full, at least once, and okay, just once. So I'm aware of the fact that a lot of what is in my mind has not been conveyed in the slightest. Very little there for anybody to go off in terms of what I'm really putting forward, and maybe I'm doing that on purpose. I'd like to believe I'm not, but I mean, I do have a sales background. I don't do sales on ethics because I'm usually fairly good at sales. If I believe in the product, I'm 100% behind it, and I do sales. So I'm usually pro-consumer, pro-end user. And I guess going to sleep last night and trying to develop a more positive relationship towards being in front of a camera, I sort of started to think, well, what would I talk about? And the nature of these videos is more a case of me seeing, I believe when you're in the right place at the right time, things flow very easily. And I guess the trusting in these videos is that I might just say the appropriate thing at the appropriate time. And I'm just therefore going stream of consciousness. and it's not ideal. It's not ideal for me. It's not ideal for you, and kind of you matter more than me in this one. Otherwise, there really isn't me in front of a video another day if I don't capture an audience. So I really want to make this worth your time, to which you're probably looking at your watch going, okay, well, come on, roll on. So look, please, I am just trying to be a little bit human through all of this, and not for the nature of if I am soft, weak, fallible in front of a camera, that is it in the counselling relationship, it's the onion layers. So if I show some of the traits that we all know that we have deep down, and we usually as a facade wear and mask from the public around us, that we have a frail internal landscape, that other people go, yeah, I can identify with that person, or maybe that person has aspects of me in them and they might be able to understand what's going on for me. Because let's face it, not all countries have the same, I can't say mindset. I mean, we're all exposed to mostly those of us with media are exposed to a lot of the similar medias, and arguably that shapes a lot of the way we see the world around us. And that's sad, because obviously the media we have on TV has to have drama in it in order for it to be exciting or worthwhile. And so therefore we don't really have a lot of good role models in a world where we're made up of smaller and smaller families. And that's the meat and potatoes of today's video. This theme I was thinking about last night when going to sleep, and what I would talk about was something that most of us already know, which is the current world isn't necessarily working out. But I feel in order to pitch a solution, when I keep using terms like happiness and sounding like, and I've hung out in the Byron Bay area, Mullumbimby, Nimbin, I guess is further inland. It's the counterculture movement zone in this country. I think Tucson, I mean, there's other areas in other countries that might have a similar demographic. If you're in a place like California, which is a significant amount of America's population, I imagine there would be suburbs. So look, if I keep talking about happiness, everyone's pitched happiness. You know, everyone wants to sell the miracle cure, which is eternal life, happiness. You know, these things are done. So I come across as a salesperson when I talk about things that are absolutely important to us, but I'm just another source of noise. Obviously, what's this person's angle? So today, instead of talking about the things that we potentially want, let's talk about the reasons why we need to move away from what we currently are committing to. And it's all the structures in the modern world that are all about to topple. I think I might have used the term house of cards at some point, and if not, it's a term that I see society as, you know, and I see society as rigid. I mean, if I scoot down the road, all the houses around me might be double brick and, you know, double glazing windows and very, very well built. You know, no wolf's going to come along and huff and puff and blow them down. So look, not everything looks like a house of cards, but that's just it. Nothing is going to sell its weakness. Everything is going to sell its strength. And when it does that, it misrepresents itself. And sometimes we see things just crash and burn and exit out of the market, and we go, well, where did that come from? But we've grown up through different times, and I find that the pace of living after circa 2000 has increased as time has gone on. And whether that's formed a disconnect in the generation below us as a rejection of what they see as an untenable way forward. Maybe they see the stresses of their parents, or the lack of solidarity in their potential future probably causes them a fear-based reaction, which would make them want to reject the seriousness of which is the modern world. I can see why people would consume more, but we've definitely moved to an era of consumption. And so far I've pitched this concept of we move towards an era of happiness, and I've made mention that we all work, and there's a lot of ways in which we work where we make a lot of money, and ultimately that, for me, I see media as a very high income stream zone. And if people, be it doctors, lawyers, musicians, or script writers or actors, people, anybody, commits to their path, they actually don't need to be remunerated as much, as long as they've got everything they need, and their descendants will have everything that they need, and that they know that they are being paid fairly. I mean, that's the important thing, is that they are getting absolutely the money. But I do feel that when we have a society where we will all be propped up with everything we want, this need to constantly take will change. But at the moment we live in a society where we need to constantly take, and that is for a range of reasons. So let's talk about what we're coming from and why either it's not going to work or it's about to topple, so that if I, in another video, or maybe later in this one if it's a really long one, move into talking about what we want, it's because we need to know what we need to move away from, because some of that will shape ways in which we need to change. So in the course of my life, I've seen, and we can't call it planned obsolescence, that started with the light bulb going back quite a while ago. Look, let's talk about something fun. I'm into hi-fi. So in the 90s, in the higher segment, actually, I'll give two examples here. There was an amplifier in the 90s when surround sound was coming to market. It was made by one company and it got Home Theatre Receiver of the Year. Year in, year out, year in, year out, year in, year out. And it didn't have to change itself. Now, when you don't have to bring a new model to market every year, you don't have teething issues. You don't have areas of it that need to be refined and fixed. Arguably, it's better to be able to make something that's good, reliable, and going to last. And if subtle changes need to be made to it to improve it along the way, you do. So the amp I've just talked about was in the upper segment. And this was a state where if you saved up all your coins, all your pennies, and bought what was considerably the best amp on the market, it was going to last you for a while and you were going to enjoy it. And it wasn't going to be superseded overnight. Now, that was the top segment of the market. Now, if we go back more than a decade, maybe up to 15 years before that, another amplifier came to the market, very, very much the entry level, and that was its intention, be the cheapest. And yes, it had maybe 2 revisions, but its runtime was a decade, and in the market it was sold for. And that's the world that I've come from. I've seen that. I've seen when cars were built to last 20 years, or that you inherited your parents' fridge when you set up your house. When a couple got married, sometimes the washing machine or the fridge was second hand because they lasted so long. Now, the average life expectancy of many consumer products has been shortening. And there's a range of reasons for this, but mostly it's that manufacturers realise that they, and I think it comes down to the notion of quarterly profits or annual. If you're a CEO and you need to have annual income, you need to have constant turnover. So if you put out the perfect product and it runs for 7 or 8 years, if you've only got a limited pool of people to sell to and you sell to all of them, it actually looks like by year 5 or year 6 that you're not really doing your job right, because where are the sales? And so whilst people might have lots of faith in your company, and I think goodwill is only worth about 10% in value of a company based on, last time I heard, what it was factored to be. And I'm sure that would vary depending on the industry and the type of business. But being the good player in a market doesn't necessarily net you the worth. And certainly new features and new and improved, I think, are the buzzwords. I think there's an old Garfield comic, which is, whatever happened to old and inferior? Everything's new and improved, and it generally isn't, and that might be something I move towards in this video, just to give some examples of what's happened in the last couple of years of how things shuffle up. But going back to this time that people have experienced, and probably is a reason why they get stressed as the modern world goes on, because they realise that the precious money that they earn is so ineffective in terms of buying solutions to problems or happiness, happy feelings with a nice surround amp or a TV or a mobile phone. Mobile phones are probably one of the expensive objects that everybody buys, and it's a deprecated market that the chip makers need to. Okay, I'll talk about this now. So in the modern world, right, so versus where we've come from, where things were built to last and we bought them and we trusted in them, and the world could afford to manufacture them. That is to say that we weren't just building things for the scrap heap. So not the world financially affording, I mean eco, I don't know, what is the ecosystem? Yes. Anyway, the world's ecosystems weren't actually being polluted with everything in the aspect of making products. So spinning forward, moving to the modern mobile phone, with the exception of one player in the market who might have control over a hardware and a software ecosystem, where they don't have to deprecate their hardware in order to, that they can make profits in one aspect of their product that will actually pay for the other aspect of the product to not necessarily have to be so profitable. Whereas if you don't have a slice in the software pie and you have to make money off just hardware, then you need to keep selling hardware. And so, and I'm not talking about the companies that sell the phones. This is more so the chips that go into the phones. If you need to sell new chips, and so the problem is if you put out a phone and it's really great and nobody needs to upgrade it, then you don't sell more chips. And so, you know, whether or not this has happened, I've seen it happen a few times where a security, and in fact I'd like to name names of the players because I've been burnt, but I'll try not to. I'll give an example. Going back about 5-6 years ago now, there was a theoretical security threat. And when I say theoretical security threat, it had been demonstrated, at least it had been talked about, and somebody might have been able to achieve it. And what they were doing is they had a particular processor, and they were running a virtual machine. So they were running an operating system, and inside that operating system they were running a window. And in that window was essentially another operating system. And then they, in another window, opened up another operating system, another virtual operating system, if you will, another instance. And they speculated that if you were to do internet banking in one of them, or something to do which might have a secure aspect of your life in it, that there might be a way, in this said situation where you're running an operating system with another operating system, another operating system in it, that there might be a way that you would be able to access data that was stored in the cache. Now, cache is just like, it's like RAM. RAM is the thinky space, but RAM's quite slow, and what's quite quick is when you put RAM right in the actual middle of the CPU. It's usually about 10 times quicker, maybe 15 times quicker. Can depend, this is level 1, level 2, level 3 cache. In this particular case, this CPU that they were looking at had massive cache. And cache is what you do when you bring a new chip to market and you don't know what speeds you'll be able to bring it up to. You put lots of cache on it and it guarantees you a minimum level of performance that'll allow you to sell as an improved product over the previous models. And cache is hard because it takes up a lot of die space, it runs very hot. There's reasons why, I guess, later models that are maybe more designed to make profit, or maybe once they've refined the chip design and they figured out the thermals of it and they can change a few of the modules so that the overall thermals are roughly equal, better distributed and therefore easier to pull from the chip consistently and push for a much higher speed. But cache, quite often when you're bringing a new chip design to market that's not necessarily an evolution of the previous parts with subtle refinements, it's I think we used to refer to them as the tick and the tock cycle. Every so often you get something new and then you get the refinement, and then you get something new and then you get the refinement. And so cache is when you get something new, you get like a lot of cache. It's been my experience. And when you have no cache on a chip, it generally slows down a lot. Going back in history, there's been times where they've gone, oh look, we'll make for the masses a really cheap chip and we'll pull the cache off, and then they've measured it and gone, well, pulling all the cache off was a bit rough, couldn't really do much with that, and yeah, it ran pretty badly. Yes, the speed looked the same, it looked like it was the same 300 megahertz, but it ran abysmally. So we'll make a new version of it and put just a little bit of cache on it. But in the case of this security example I'm giving, is that they'd come up with this concept, this method, theoretically, where if you'd had some secure details in one, there might have been a way where those numbers might have been in the cache memory and it might have been accessible through another virtualized instance of the operating system. And okay, whilst it might have been doable, right, the reality is, and this is what's important, we need to look at theory versus reality. And this is quite often the difference between engineering and the real world. In this instance, nobody buys a computer, runs an operating system, runs another operating system to do banking in such a way that it might be hacked. Now, again, in this theoretical scenario, you needed to, in order for this system to be compromised, you needed to physically get to the machine, you needed to physically have access to the machine at a run level, and you needed to physically be able to run some software. And based on the notion that whilst this had never happened anywhere in the globe, that it theoretically potentially could happen, the manufacturer of said processor, who was about to release a new processor, which in some areas wouldn't have benchmarked better than this 5-year-older processor, realised our new processor, it wouldn't look good if it could be outperformed by a 5-year-old processor, even if it was a flagship, top of the line, you know, the most expensive processor you could buy. We can't have that. We don't want any negative press. So they deprecated the old part, and they rolled out using a software front end, and we call this collusion in the industry, I believe. they basically put out a security patch that it turned off the cache. And given that first generation of that chip needed that cache for its speed advantages, it ran at about 60% of the speed of the later, 65% of the speed of the later processors. So it wasn't essentially quick, but it just had a lot of cache, a lot of RAM built into the chip. And by shutting all that RAM down so it couldn't be used, they crippled it. And I lost over 2 security updates, so they didn't just do it once, about 20% performance. Now, that's a bit rude. I paid for that, and the security threat itself wasn't real. And at the end of the day, I should have had the option. And that's the problem, is I didn't have the option. So I had 2 computers. I actually had, and I bought one for a nephew as well, 3 computers of the X99 platform. Basically made fairly well. They lost a lot of frame rate in their video games, in the games that pushed those numbers, which is only a handful of games, big open world games that usually, there's not a lot of games that are CPU bound, and certainly cache. Cache is not something that I guess that the big manufacturers expect, game makers necessarily expected in a market where if you're not going to write for just 1 or 2% of the CPUs right at the top of the line. So it was seldom used, but you could easily measure examples where it had been taken down. So getting back to, say, phone chip manufacturers, right? Here's my fear, is that they need to make their money by selling unit sales. And if the phones that we have now will have so much power, and they do, this is the problem, is that even a desktop computer from 20 years ago had enough power for more than most of what everybody would ever do on a computer. You know, typing documents, viewing emails, web browsers, that sort of stuff, absolutely perfect. If you configured a machine, fairly streamlined, certainly ran an efficient operating system that needed about 1/3 the resources to perform just as well, machines from 20 years ago would hold up very well today, easily, for the majority of what people do with them. Unless the software is made very bloaty and very inefficient, which may or may not have happened. I'm not here to be a doomsday speaker, but I do know that we need to move away from a system where everything gets planned to be made redundant or obsolete. And so when I look at mobile phones, right? So mobile phones by 2010-ish generally had as much power as a good desktop computer from 10 years prior. And now mobile phones have gotten ridiculously powerful, and this need to replace them every year. There's nothing about them that would require to be replaced every year, except for potentially getting security updates. And if security updates are tied to the platform, and what we've noticed across all major players is that now they tie security updates with the operating system, meaning you have to move forward. And if the operating system doesn't support the older platforms, which in one ecosystem it does, but again, because they own the software and the hardware and they can make money from software sold in their shop, they don't need to sell new hardware in order to make money. But if you're not in that ecosystem and you're a chip maker and you put out a really great chip, you might not need to see further unit sales, right? There's enough mobile phones out there with enough power to all do the things that most people need from them, that unless we convince people that phones are a fashion accessory and need to be updated all the time, and some people will buy into that quite happily, unless we make it so that, I don't know, phones have sealed designs with their battery stuck in them so you can't keep them, refresh them after 3 to 5 years. And I think that's what we've found has happened, is that it's 3 to 5 years. The phone companies have figured out, in one ecosystem, the phone companies are realising that they've basically tailored or tapered themselves to a smaller market segment. They realise that the customers they want to have are the people with money. So the people with money, those people are able to lawyer up. So you don't antagonise those customers. And though you seem to operate maybe with 3 years of security updates on a monthly basis, and you make it look like the platform's really solid, and the battery will certainly run about that length, at least. And so the primary user of the phone, that's fine. But the hand-me-down user, right, the person who gets it for maybe year 4 and 5, they are being handed that phone for a reason. The primary user, for whatever reason, really doesn't believe in it anymore, and that's usually because the security updates are moved to quarterly or half-yearly or yearly or maybe no more. And that fear that we need a security update, so it's no longer a case of we run security software, it would seem. I mean, you'd be mad in the 90s when the internet sort of started about. Security software was sort of what you needed. And I think by the year 2000 we realised it wasn't just security software. You needed a firewall, and you needed an antivirus, you needed a pop-up blocker. And so people were willing to sell us packages of so-called security software. Now those aspects probably spread all across the software and the hardware, and any aspect of it at any point might be told to us that we need to upgrade. And if they rotate it in such a way that you need to upgrade your operating system here, you need to upgrade your hardware there, it's fair to say that we're not getting 20 years of life out of our phones. And I think the planet would probably prefer it, given some of the rare metals and minerals that may be sourced by not always the best of methods or most ethical of methods, or supporting proper markets. I think there might be precious metals in the antenna circuit. There might be aspects of a mobile phone that we don't really want to have to keep burying them and making new ones. And also, there's a lot of incredible chemical process. Hey, Gigi. Hey, Gigi. Hey, puss. A lot of incredible. There's a lot to a phone that the world just doesn't need to turn over as landfill. And so, yes, we can say, oh, look, we ship all our 3-year-old phones off to another country and then they use them. But I go to the example of Greenpeace actually had to get onto Samsung's case when the Note 7 phone apparently had another round of battery fails, and Samsung actually built 2 machines to work 24 hours to pull apart these sealed phones in order to be able to put a different battery in them, which wouldn't cause the problem. And I think Greenpeace got onto them enough to say, look, you can't just churn 1 to 2 million phones into the landfill. We really want you to sell them. And so a version of the phone was brought back to market. I think it was sold in some countries. I managed to get one. I thought it was a terrific phone, so I'd already had 2 of them and they'd been recalled, and I was stuck in Tasmania when the second recall was done, and I was told I wouldn't be allowed to get on a plane again if I had that phone. So I actually had to waste some of my travel time in Tasmania going to a phone shop and saying, look, I've got to give you that one back. And they're like, well, what do you want? And I'm like none of these. I actually wanted that phone, and I probably made a quick decision and got on my plane and away, life was on again. But look, I mean, I'm really glad that a third-party company, Greenpeace, for example, came in and went, look, we should probably not just channel that over to landfill. But I mean, who's looking after our interests? Who's sailing the ship? I mean, at the moment, what we're seeing is that in each private enterprise sector is that companies need these faster turnover cycles, and they need to come up with ways to generate annual profit, and that is to the detriment of people. And I can only think of, say, a big software company that in the 90s they had a concept that they wanted to put a dumb terminal, if you will, a computer with no brains, essentially, in everybody's houses. They realised this internet thing was going to be awesome, and they wanted everyone to have a dumb terminal, and they just wanted to get an annual return, an annual fee, if you wish, to get access to some productivity software where you can type letters, or Excel, the concept of the spreadsheet, which is really what computers are good for in terms of business use, going back to the 70s and whenever, depending on how successful your business was, I guess, was when you implemented computers. But the notion that they could do aspects of your bookkeeping or large number tables, spreadsheets, was terrific. So in the middle 90s, when one particular company went, we want to do a dumb terminal, I believe the motivations for that were quite sound. That is, if you're a chief executive officer of a company, or if you're someone who's been brought in to make that company generate profits, you want the income stream to always be bigger than the one previous, growing, if you will. And if some of your products are released every 3 years or every 4 years, what you end up finding is you get this lump sum, you get this nice payout when the product releases, but towards year 3.5, right before the new one's coming out, you probably get a little bit of buyer hesitancy where they're like, oh, there's a new one just around the corner, I'll wait. So what these companies did over the next 15 odd years was move to a model of renting the software. Okay, so they didn't get the dumb terminal in everyone's houses like they wanted to at that time in history. But they recognised that a subscription-based model where they get annually money stabilises the income stream and makes the heads of the company look very successful. Okay, now as they get pay bonuses that are quite, I would consider, obscene given what they're actually doing, it probably worked for them. and it might have worked for everybody who worked at said companies that were at the top, maybe, that would maybe get some sort of incentives or bonuses. So this notion of having to constantly receive more profit each quarter as to be seen as successful it's a fallacy. It's the premise is sound because bigger numbers is better, but in the real world it doesn't necessarily work that way, and certainly not to the end users, and not when we want to have faith in our companies. And so I ethically vote with my wallet, and if I find a company that supports its end users or gives better after sales service or service outside of a warranty period that's exceptional, those companies, they don't need advertising. Like, not to me. I'm a convert, and I will buy their next product sight unseen or review unseen, and I'll have faith. And I think a lot of the small players that have acted that way in the market are actually bought up by bigger companies because of their exceptional customer service handling or their good reputations. And in the world, it's really just become a case of which fish is biggest, who can swallow up the most. I don't know if anyone's ever played the game Hungry Hippos, but there's a bunch of marbles in the middle of the game, and you've all got a little almost mechanised hippo where you can pull a lever and its mouth will come out, and you'll attempt to grab the marbles. And in Hungry Hippos, you basically got 4 little hippos around a little circle where everybody's just jamming their little lever to try and grab as many marbles as possible, and that's how you win. And the reason I describe this game is there a more appropriate description of the modern world? We're all trying to grab as many marbles as we possibly can, and the marbles, of course, represent not happiness. They represent tangible, not intangible concepts, not things that are tricky to measure, or might it be subjective value. We try to measure objective value things that we can touch, things that are measurable. And so the marbles that we go for are, weirdly enough, intangible concepts. They're large money pools that we never actually see the piles of money, but we on our phone, we can log into our bank and we can look at some numbers on the screen, and that represents everything in the modern world. And this is really sad. We don't have, nobody has stability or reliability. But let's look at where it all fails. And it all fails as the belts get tightened. So at the moment, we're looking at 3 years of life, for example, from a phone for the primary user, the person with the money, who can lawyer up if the product doesn't actually do what it's meant to do. Beyond that, you might get another couple of years when it's handed down to a nephew or a niece. And that's where we've moved to. But the market's tightened. Okay, so I don't want to speculate about phones. We all have phones, and that I don't want to offend people. You might really like your phone brand, and you might know they were completely unethical, but you buy into them anyway. I don't know which phone brands are unethical. I'm basically on the nature that they're all in alignments with chip makers. We don't know the agreements that they've got. They've all got to churn over products in order to sell new chips, and the old chips might have security issues. That means they have to get software updates that deprecate huge parts of the chip, maybe the cache. And all of a sudden it's working less powerfully, and all of a sudden we're motivated to get the new part. But look, I do think some of the players get negative press because they say, when that new operating system rolled out, it ran slower. I think if we look at them over a larger period of time, we actually realise they generally try to fix it, so it does run up to speed again. But sometimes a milestone comes out that actually exits a player from the market. And I'll give the example of WinPhone. WinPhone 6 didn't have backwards compatibility for any of the WinPhone CEs before it. It was a different back-end operating system. And the only reason people had stuck in a WinPhone ecosystem versus, say, Palm or Symbian as the other operating system of choice on smart devices, we stuck with Windows WinCE because it was backwards compatible. For all of the apps that these best engineers and techs had written that were really practical for infield techs or geeks like myself, they were really useful. And so when WinPhone 6 came to market, it's a new operating system, and we don't support any of the old software, it hurt themselves to the point where they were gone just about overnight. So supporting your existing user base, pretty huge, pretty worthwhile, and I think a lot of us expect that. And for example, I've just been playing with a recent platform that's upgraded, and I'm amazed at how much every single one of my apps basically feels like it needs to be updated to a version that's compatible with the new operating system. And that tells me that the new operating system's not... Look, I haven't read enough about it. I hope it's got a whole security back end, and maybe that's why these old bits of software need to be updated to it. But the problem is that there can be a perfect piece of software that's been running for 10, 15 years, that the person who made it isn't updating it anymore because it worked perfectly, didn't need any updates. And now all of a sudden we've got this situation where in order for users who are forced to the new operating system in order to get security updates for their existing hardware won't be able to use software that they've paid money for, and not for any fault of their own. It's because they did what they've been trained to do. But I mean, if we don't look at the rate of phones necessarily, because we don't know, but they do seem to be living less and less and less time, and we can say, oh, that kind of started with the notion of sealed batteries in them, but no, they've been having less and less and less time of livable time because of a range of things. But I look at all industries, and so I got into, I worked for a little while when I first moved over to this side of the country for a rental agency. So we would rent out fridges and washing machines and also TVs and probably stereo systems and all sorts of stuff. But the best part of the job was when you went into families that had obviously just set up in a new house, or for whatever reason they didn't have a fridge and a washing machine, or the basics they needed, the white goods they needed to live, and absolutely joyous role, to be able to set people up to be able to do what they want to do, to live. And what I quickly found out in the time I was with the company was the market statistics with regards to life expectancies of particular products. And so my mother, for at least 18 years, probably used a washing machine that had been given to her by her mother. And that washing machine, I bought my first washing machine and had it for a very, very long time before my mother's machine had played up to the point where, oh, look, do you want my washing machine? But my washing machine wasn't built to last anywhere near as long. But fridges, fridges were the same sort of thing. You'd almost get 3 generations of people off a fridge. And okay, it might need regassing once in its life. It might need some seals redone, a little bit of service, a little bit of maintenance. But that makes sense, and that's what the world sort of needs. We don't need to rebuild 100% of every device. We probably need to, in some aspects, either modular or better engineering to make it so aspects of them can be serviced. But so middle 2000s, the expectancy of a fridge had dropped down. It was the longest of all the objects sold in the consumer space. It was expected to be about 7 years. A washing machine was about 5 at that time, and TVs were on their way down. Well, that depended. So the tube TVs of the generation of the decade before generally lasted a very, very long time. The first run of the new products were built to be equivalent to the outgoing product and were designed for long run times. But as the products sort of got cheaper, and so when we moved to going to TVs here, light emitting diodes, LED TVs, or before that they were LCD TVs. They still are LCD TVs, but they were using those little light emitting diodes as a backlight. Now they're very power efficient. There's a few good things about them, and maybe having brightness control over the zones. There might have been technological reasons to implement them. But versus the TVs, the CCFL TVs before them, the life expectancy of the backlight component was a lot less. And so you could see, okay, these TVs are being built for 20% less lifetimes. But it didn't really matter because other aspects of the TV were evolving at such a level that consumers were just buying and selling them, usually within 5 years anyway. And so it was never going to be an issue. But we can't afford to live in a world where everything is being made redundant. And that's not this, oh wow, he comes from a hippie community or, a bunch of earthers that are all about, the environment. It's, let's look at it in the inverse. Let's look at it, the people that just want to, have no touch with the dirt of the earth and just want to live in a pristine little box and go to a really clean building to work and not experience anything that isn't, manufactured and top level engineering. There's a cost associated with that, and if everything that is in their world needs to be replaced ongoing, the efficacy of their time earning a wage, even if they're earning a great wage, they are stuck in the same cycle as the rest of us. They're having to buy these products that fail, and it's not always the failing of the product. A person with money can replace the product easily. It's the downtime and the inconvenience. And so if I was giving anybody advice for buying a computer, which has been my profession for many a decade, I've always recommended to buy the reliable product. And it's because the warranty it's not worth jack. When the typical warranty service is, we're going to wipe your machine and give it back to you, or we'll give you another one. That doesn't help you get your essay back that you were 70% through typing, or it doesn't get your photos restored. we needed reliability, and so I'm a big fan of buying reliable. And yeah, a lot of these markets are being deprecated, and the time cost to the end user to have a relationship with these companies who generally don't want to talk with us, especially, and if you've got money, yes. So some companies make it so that, oh yeah, if you buy our product, well, for 2 years, we'll talk to you like you're the best person ever. But come year 3, we don't want to know you. And again, that ensures that they're only dealing with people who've got the money to buy the expensive product in the first instance, the same people who can lawyer up if the product doesn't serve them. But as soon as that product is handed down to a nephew or something, and if they actually need service because the party is intentionally being wiped out of the market for whatever reasons, it's like, oh no, you can pay us just for us to even talk to you about that product. So the companies have figured out the best ways to qualify who is worth their time to engage with. And the next time the belt tightens, is your socioeconomic group going to be good enough to be worth their time? Think about that. I can be silent. Are you the next person to get the chop? Are you about to be a member in the group that next goes, oh, this isn't good, and I'll put my hand up? Because I tell you, they won't do it to everyone overnight. If they do it to everyone, people complain and things get remedied. But if they do it a little bit by little bit by little bit, there's not enough people complaining at any one time to actually get things fixed or changed. And I mean, that's me in a nutshell. I mean, I had this notion probably a month and a half ago, and it was gave me goosebumps. I thought, man, if I go on one of these internet TV type channels, and if I could just create like a viral video and just explain to everybody, just put 1 cent in an account, right? Just support me for 1 cent, and what I will do with your 1 cent, your 1 cent is a vote, right? And my spiel wouldn't have been that way. I think that would have been at the end of it. I would have gotten people all hyped for it. And the idea being is that I wanted to be a representative. I wanted to go in there and have enough money, right? Because money speaks, to be able to go into these players, all the big companies, and have enough weight to make change. Okay, so it might just be that your particular phone has a Bluetooth codec that you absolutely desperately need, and an update comes out and they take away the Bluetooth codec that you wanted. Okay, so if everybody on the planet had all given me a cent for a range of reasons, for all the different ways that money is power, and if we just empowered one person who was altruistically minded to spend this money in a way that would change markets and counteract sometimes accidents in the way markets go, and be able to go, right, company, you drop your Bluetooth with the operating system update. Look, why isn't it there? Oh, it's going to cost $18,000 to implement. Right, there's $18,000. Yeah, just do it. But also the power of, if you have a spokesperson with power behind them, and they represent a large mass of people, the power to get a seat at the table quite often is what it comes down to. And I guess I've tangented off there. I'd really love to flesh that idea out further. And it's not that I necessarily want it to kick off, because in fairness, it was a side quest, if you will, on the path of my life. And I've got a few side quests. I've got a lot of things, a lot of business ideas I could put in play that might generate money at a private enterprise level. But it's not really my interest. And I would, as a parallel, I mean, I would want to do them, because if you need to make money for your primary causes, you do it. And I mean, even a couple of years ago, I wanted to pitch. Here's some ideas. I'm a fighter. I come up with at least 5 good ideas, usually 3 good ideas every day, and quite salient ideas that would generally make money. But one of the best ones, and again, this would have been an ad that I would have pitched. And so I know I haven't fleshed out the previous idea, but I don't really want to talk about that, because otherwise it's a 30-minute pitch, and it's a good pitch, and it's a goosebump pitch. And the idea is to get everyone to go, oh yeah, man, only a cent, and some people might get more than a cent, some people might go up as far as $1. And that there could have been enough money behind one individual to put a stopper in the modern world just sweeping over the masses, the general public. But look, reaching out to the sectors of the market that have money. Quite a few years ago, I thought I had a pitch that would have been, let me build like a big resort or something with lots of rooms. And so the idea was that in my local environment at the time, I was out in rural wheat belt, and a lot of unemployment, a lot of unhappiness. And I thought, look, if I can just give everyone a job in a sort of a hotel type environment, or really give these young people a chance to educate themselves. There were TAFEs, but the TAFE time, and when you're in the country, you got to drive for like 30 minutes just to see the next bastion of civilization, and it might be two bastions of civilization along where there might be a TAFE, and they don't rate, the teachers and the days that those buildings are open aren't necessarily in alignment with only having their students travel out once or twice a week. So, the travel time alone can be huge, but it can actually it can stymie people coming to get education, when it's like, or I can just go down to old Mick Jones's farm there and just shear sheep, that's good money. It's good money now. And it's like, yeah, it is, but over time, you're good muscles, but when you wear yourself out at a body level, non-stop with your work, when you're a hard worker bee and not using other aspects of your faculties, bodies can wear out, and we don't really want to do that. We don't want to just work a few people into the ground. It's not ideal. If people need to work, that's great. But anyway, getting back to this concept, was really, really, really expensive apartments, really, really high level of living and qualifying, and having not just your tennis courts and your pools and various faculties, but lots of on-site faculties, to the point where you might have, I think there's like a pressure chamber room that's needed for some medical features and things, and these things wouldn't have been available in the local area. And so this notion of building like a super stable, but the idea being is that it's watertight, that it would have given people that were germaphobes or virus phobes the ability to just lock themselves down in a way, and it would have sold really well, and it would have been really limited. It would have been like 70 units or something, and I sort of technically crunched the numbers and thought, what, if I could put a big page ad over, and I don't know if it would have been sweet. I would have looked at the demographics of the world and gone, who's got lots of disposable wealth and might want a climate maybe on the flip side of their seasons to be able to go to, and so in their winter hang out in summer, or maybe you like snow all year long, and so in your summer you rack off to a cold climate, and it would have been, and maybe it would have been like the timeshare accommodation. Australia didn't get timeshare accommodation. We missed out on that whole, I don't know if it was a pyramid, but it was great businessing, and look, some things just never hit us. I guess that would have been the upper socioeconomic version of the pitch. The middle socioeconomic version of that pitch would be, and still totally viable and something I'd still like to do, but private enterprise. And the reason I've got people in front of these videos is not for private enterprise, it's actually for charity, charitable reasons. But to say that there's lots of ways to generate profit, and creating little farms. So 8 to 12 houses on a really large, because in Australia we've still got large, you can buy large tracts of land, you can buy hectares and hectares of land for reasonable prices, and then doing the land up. But what you're essentially doing is like maybe building a zoo, or maybe building facilities on site that the children of respective families all have themselves something to maintain, right? Some ability to learn some discipline, like, you got to go down and feed the possums at 6 o'clock, and having a timetable and having the ability for people to learn management and various skill sets. It would allow for people that are a little bit more rural to learn skill sets that would then be transferable to useful in the city or any job that they might ever get. But these little self-sufficient farms, if you will, that are that they each contain something of worth, such that if you had a network of them, like maybe there's 10 of them, and these guys have paintball down pat, these guys have a mild fun park down pat, they might have flying foxes and whatnot going around, but I never really took the idea that far in my head. I think I worked off the notion that having a mini zoo, protected wildlife, running down the middle of a giant bit of land, such that all the houses didn't really see each other, and then the layout of the houses such that no windows ever faced out in a way that could see any of their neighbours, but you're actually quite close to people, that if you ever needed to call out, or if you actually needed to go and borrow a cup of sugar, you could. And so moving on, what I've been told is that we need, it's about structures of about 150 people is a community size, and up to about 300, but about 150 people is a community size where you recognise people and you feel responsibility to the people that you see, and you've got enough specialisation that you can go forward. Now, obviously, said groups of 150 still need access to dedicated heart surgeons. You're probably not going to have a heart surgeon in your 150 people skill set. So, look, I'm a big fan at the moment of this idea of allowing people to form into neighbourhoods And you don't want to create a situation where you only just get one class or one type of personality in a neighbourhood. And it doesn't work because their children always reject, what their parents tell them. If you drink full cream milk and white bread, your kids are going to drink skim milk or light white milk and brown bread. It's like we just need to reject whatever the parents told us. And I think that's in the way they say that the grandparents and the kids have the most in common. It might be more to it. There might be all sorts of esoteric stuff that we just don't understand about the notion of what is spirit and what is the eternal body. And we only experience the dimension of time in one way. That stuff's all beyond me. It sounds like a fun conversation over a beverage sometime. But what was I talking about? Groups of 150 people, communities. So look, we do need to form a solid sense of society, and we need to do it in such a way that works out. Now, I guess I've done the opposite of what I said I was going to do today, and I think I need to acknowledge that we are transitioning. I did say that I would talk about what's wrong with the existing world and why it won't work out, and I guess aspects of what I was going to say regarding that, just so we can move on with a clean slate, tabula rasa. It's the service time. So if something breaks and you need to communicate at every single level, whether it be the item, whether it be the initial purchase of the item, the servicing of the item and maintaining it in the first instance with little updates and whatnot, whether it be when you've got a problem having to communicate your issues with it. And I'm not just talking here about physical possessions, I'm talking about even just sharing public transport. It's like if there's aspects of it that are incommunicable for you to get your vote passed up the hill in terms of what needs to be changed, then we all feel disenfranchised. We all feel we don't feel like we have the personal power to make the differences. And when we live responsibly in a society where we can contribute and we feel that our voice has worth, society goes forward. Okay, we at every single level, and especially when I look at the biggest income sectors at the moment. So generally jobs, everyone goes for jobs where the money is. And so at the moment, everyone wants to be a scriptwriter. Everyone wants to make shows for the TV networks, and that's fair because they're short of material and there's a lot of money to be made there. But it's about right vocation. If you're doing something because there's a job, and I can think of an example of a teacher that tortured my child, and it was a pretty atrocious situation. In fact, there was 2 teachers in the entire school that were both fairly difficult, I can only imagine, for the kids to get along with. And the only way that the upper faculty of the school could not have all the parents ring up and say, I don't want my child in that class, was to actually put said difficult teachers across the board in one year so that you couldn't transition out of one class to another. And so literally that's what happened. And all I can understand is that it wasn't the right vocation. I don't believe that at that time in their life that person was in a position to be teaching and engaging with small children. And so a lot of people seek out a role because they might have been bullied at school, they might have been unhappy, and so they seek out power. And it's, for a world-class therapist, if they could just be made happy, they wouldn't use their positions of power for the rest of their life to exact revenge on every other human being that they meet. And there are people out there that are like that. And when we live in a world that's filled with unhappiness, it's a vicious circle. So going back to the potential writers, if they're just not right vocation for them, and if they haven't addressed their own concerns, they're going to write stuff that's going to have all those same issues in it, which is great. People will identify with it. They'll find an audience. But it's one of the first rules of counselling. If you want to go out there and help people, you've got to have unconditional positive regard. Okay, now what is unconditional positive regard? Well, 3 best words, and I'd actually swear, I wanted to swear just there and say 3 best words. So unconditional, there's no conditions, right? It's going to happen. Positive, okay, well, positive, right? I see that person in a good light. Regard, how I think about someone. So if I always think about someone in a positive light, how would you feel if it didn't matter what you were saying to me, I could see you in the light of always looking at you with a positive regard? And so that actually becomes one of the first rules of anyone who undergoes some counselling training. They recognise that in a counselling role, they need to put their own personal biases and personal agendas at the door so they can sit genuinely 100% in front of someone and hear the person for their story. Because often the counselling relationship isn't, you don't give advice. You're empowering a person to have their little breakthrough moments, to realise their own personal strength and therefore be able to heal their own life. And unconditional positive regard is a large part of that. Now, that's an example of right vocation. What if the counsellor didn't have that step down pat? What if we needed lots of counsellors, and so all of a sudden the pay was really attractive and people were just keen to get to the end of their degree so they could get out there and making money, and they didn't necessarily follow the steps. They didn't believe them in their heart. And same with teachers. I see that at the moment the teachers and the nurses are highly underpaid for the roles they do, and the reason that the market can do that is because these people, in their hearts, know these are the jobs they need to do. They will turn up day in, day out. They will work a really hard job day in, day out because it's the right vocation. Their passion is to do that. And if we start to pay, right, now look at the example of politics, right? When you don't pay politics very well, a couple of issues here. You don't attract people from the private business sector who can actually manage well. You get what you're given if you don't pay really well. But what do you get? Well, ideally, you get statesmen. You get people that are motivated to do the job because it needs to be done. It needs to be, something needs to be done. And so their passion usually gets them over the line and makes them really brilliant at what they're doing. And so right vocation is the most important thing I believe we need to do to nurture people towards. Because if your teachers are motivated to teach because they're passionate about educating others and they've therefore got the patience, if your doctors are passionate to heal because they legitimately want people to get better, then we've actually got doctors doing the role. I mean, the first rule of medicine is to do no harm. And whatever you're doing, if that's why you got into medicine was to heal, then that's what you're going to do. But if you got into medicine to make money, and let's face it, there's a lot of money attached because for a long time we had a massive shortage, in a growing population, we had a massive shortage of doctors on the planet. And so it's like, oh, look, can you be a doctor? Can you be a doctor? Can you be a doctor? And so everybody's like, kids, you're going to be doctors when you grow up. My mother used to torture me. We'd be in the shops and there'd be like a toy that I might want. It might be, I was really little, might be a big bag of plastic army men or something, and I'd be like, it'd be all $1.99. But for $1.99, my mother would make me shake hands or sign contractual obligations that when I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor. That's a pretty good value Lego set. Toy, really, isn't it? $1.99. Way other commitments. So, look, that's the world right now. I don't want anyone to feel hoodwinked. I don't want anyone to feel locked in, certainly not over $1.99. I do feel that we need to follow our passions. I do feel that right vocation is important, and it's because if we look at the flip side to that, a society goes down at every single level. Every little part of the house of cards, if you will, is unstable. And at the moment, we can't see how unstable it is, but most of us only have the periphery of our immediate zone in front of us, or we understand our own personal industry. So a lot of us are condemning our own personal industries, going, this just isn't going to continue, this isn't sustainable. This needs to turn around. And we all realise that even our own, the businesses that we might work for just don't have enough power in the market to make the changes that are needed to turn it around. So, do we need a governing body, or do we need something that looks after everybody with the best interests at heart? Well, potentially yes, but I mean, I'd want to look at their mission statement, and I'd want to look at who's overviewing them to ensure that they're hitting said mission statement, assuming said mission statement was for the people. Now that being the case, instead of going into a new subset, I mean, I would happily talk for another half an hour. But I think anyone who's watched my videos would think, look, instead of talking for another half an hour, spend half an hour editing and make it a better video. And I agree, that is where I probably should be. Now, I must admit, I'm not at the moment. I'm a parent. I've got a lot of commitments. And there is a time of day when I get the freedom to sit down and put in a block of time. And at this point in time, I think I've got more message to share than editing to do. Now, that's not to say that in a week's time, maybe a friend will go, gee, man, you seem to be pretty consistent on that. Your videos really need some editing, and I'm really good at editing. I'll give you a hand. I've got a feeling that anyone seeing these videos in this raw state, you're just an early adopter to whatever this channel might turn into being. And I thank you. I really thank you for that commitment. I really need you to share these on, and I too would be embarrassed about sharing these on. In fact, I'm putting them up there, but I put them up without looking at them. Because of the message is more important than my ego, and that's why I don't look in a mirror before I get on the tape, and that's why I just speak as freely as I can from the heart. But I trust that if there's any purpose or worth behind what I'm doing, I trust that, and call me a loon if you will, but I trust that if there's an intelligent back-end energy in the universe that can shape or in some way aid, we the sentient life, or at least we're cognizant of ourselves. If there is anything out there which is, whether it's intuition, whether it's precognition, maybe it's just my higher self. Maybe every person is such a super, maybe we're a universe unto ourselves. A galaxy unto ourselves. Maybe each of us is a star in the night sky. We've got that much energy, and it was all the neural connections in our brains. There's more of them than there is atoms in the universe, or something. I mean, that to me doesn't make sense, because I would think atoms are needed inside of neural connections. That I don't know. I've heard some crazy science stuff. I'm sure I'm misquoting things here. But maybe it's our inherent beauty, and maybe we are timeless, and maybe we do have the ability to feed back to ourselves. And so at this point, I feel a sense of urgency to reach out and grow a stage one of the community. And by stage one, I really appreciate that this is a bond out of love. I understand the patience required to sit through one of these videos. I understand that we're not really, if we're playing gridiron, it certainly is a game of inches when I'm the captain or the ref of the team. And that's not really true. I'm actually passionate to make large plays and gain 10 yards, but I'm not in a position of power at the moment to do that myself, other than just committing the time that I can into getting some raw product down and getting this happening. Now, that isn't to say that I don't want to give 24 hours a day to this. I do need to rest, and I don't need to maintain myself a lot. I'm actually very fortunate to have a loving family, and I can eat a bowl of cereal and it only takes 30 seconds to make. So, look, I can dedicate a lot of time each day, and I really want to, but I guess it's about social responsibility too. I can't just be a burden on society, and that's monks in Japan are seen as, you'd think they're a positive thing. If you're outside of that culture, you go, oh, that's a positive thing. And I met someone from a culture where they went, no, they're detritus on civilization. They just beg, they just, we've all got to prop them up. And I don't want to have to be propped up. I really don't. And if I am going to get propped up, I want to be propped up by people who recognise that what I'm doing might be worth being backed or being propped up. So, look, I ask only that for not just your patience, but your compassion, for not judging me so harshly, and having the willingness to recognise that there might be some illumination just under the surface. If we just scratch a little bit, things might get really shiny, really golden. And in order to scratch a little bit, at the moment, I could be wrong. I'm not jumping on YouTube channel and checking how my videos are going, really. I check maybe once a day to see, has anybody found it? Because my belief is, it might be 1 in 100 people. There might be one in 1,000. There might be someone else out there that might be a bit like-minded, like myself. Hopefully not so scattered in front of a video camera, but who recognises that the motivations behind me are fairly good, and probably also has probably seen enough people in front of video cameras to go, yeah, not everybody acts normal in front of a video camera, and they might have faith in me to be a different person off screen, and that is very much the case. But I'd rather be a man of actions than of words, and at the moment I can't. I'm doing words, but my words are my action, and please take these words. These are my action. If your action is to maybe share them on to anyone who you might think might reciprocate any sentiments that you have towards this video, that might be that it's worthwhile, and maybe not this one, maybe the first one. I probably see less worth in those first two because of the nature of me feeling so awkward in front of a camera. But the sentiment is that I believe I've got a way forward for everybody, and anybody that's only just watched this video and this is their first video of me and hasn't seen what's before this. Look, I do have a solution that I believe works, and it's not mine. It's a structure that it just works, and it needs to be put out there. But in order to put it out there, it needs to be done quickly. Okay, and it's not needs to be done quickly because people are going to want to stop it. We're back to a fear-based paradigm if that's what we're doing. It needs to be done quickly because once it starts, it's going to gain momentum, and what we need then is to be able to support the people that are new to it. And in order to do that, we need a basic infrastructure in place. In order to get that basic infrastructure in place, I need support, and not just money, but people, volunteers. And in order to be able to communicate with those people, I need a team. In order to have a team, I need a little bit of money. And so we're getting right back to the what came first, the chicken or the egg. And at the end of the day, it is these words, and it is unprofessional. But look, just for anybody that can see this as something that's worth sitting on and hatching, yeah, don't sit on it, share it. And look, I'll see you next video. Thank you for your time.